Guys, we're going to talk a little Cavs with a special guest in a second, but first, one last reminder that gun violence, it's an epidemic in Cleveland. It's the leading cause of death for teenagers. And on this season of Living for We, we're asking what can be done to end cycles of violence in cities like Cleveland where the shooters value their reputations over their own lives and see innocent bystanders as collateral damage. Living for We is more than a podcast. It's a resource for communities tired of chaos and ready to build peace. The mission is simple: empower communities to create safer neighborhoods free from gun violence by highlighting local heroes, connecting resources and solutions, and building bridges through honest, community-driven dialogue. Join hosts Marlene Harris-Taylor and Maisha Watkins every other Tuesday for a brand new episode of Living for We. Keep your head up. You can find this award-winning show wherever you get your podcasts, and you can watch full episodes by searching for it, Living for We, on YouTube. We're going to bring in a special guest now to preview the Cavs-Pacers series. I know some people over with the Pacers. I texted them. I said, guys, I'm trying to get someone from the Pacers on, someone who can talk some ball, and they all immediately said you got to get Pat Boylan on. So guess what we did? We got Pat Boylan on, the Pacers play-by-play announcer, who's here to join us and talk some ball. How you doing today, Pat? Thanks for joining us on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show.
Doing well. Appreciate you guys having me here.
It's great to have you, Pat. Pacers are scrappy. They're a good team. They're an underrated team. I think that you can make the case they're the most underrated team in the Eastern Conference over the last couple of years. Not many thought that they would advance to the Eastern Conference Finals a year ago. Tell Cavs fans why this is going to be a much different series than the Heat series was.
Well, that's certainly the hope here in Indianapolis, although it would be hard for it to be much worse than the Heat series was from a Miami perspective. The Pacers the last couple of years have really been tested. They did not have home court advantage in the first round or the second round last year and won both of those series. As you noted, they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. And while they did have home court advantage against Milwaukee, it's hard to win a series when the other team has a top three player and you don't have a player quite in that realm. And so not only did the Pacers beat the Bucks, but they beat them in 5 games, a dramatic closing stretch there from Tyrese Haliburton. And look, the Cavs won 64 games and are the number 1 overall seed, and I think very deservedly the favorite here. But this is, at least should be, a few steps up in terms of caliber of competition for Cleveland as they get ready to host Monday.
I looked at the Pacers and I look at the series against the Bucks, and that was feisty. The Pacers, aren't really known, for their fieriness or to be combative like that. But I was very surprised to see they was not playing around with the Milwaukee Bucks. Is that something that is kicked up because of the playoffs, or is it just because they feel like that's the way they have to play and that's the intensity level that they have to get after in order to get where they want to go?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of those things, and I also think it dates back to the playoff series with Milwaukee last year. Whenever you play a team back-to-back years in the playoffs, by the end of all of it, you kind of end up not liking the other team very much. And the Pacers and Bucks actually played 20 times over the last 2 years, counting the regular season, counting the Emirates NBA Cup from a couple of years ago, and no other team in the NBA over the last 2 years had faced off more than 15 times. So I think that was more of a familiarity breeds contempt type of situation. Look, going into this, I don't necessarily look off the top of my head at Cleveland as a team that is going to start to potentially start things. And I don't think the Pacers are that type of team either to start things. But I think what you saw in each of the last 2 Milwaukee series is the Bucks realizing that outside of Giannis this year and outside of Damian Lillard last year, they were going to need to stir the pot a little bit to try to mix things up and win a series against Indiana. Neither of those things ended up happening, but I think some of that was a byproduct of Bobby Portis realizing, okay, we need to stir things up here to give ourselves a chance. And the Pacers are typically not the team that are going to start things, but if things do get chippy, they're not afraid to get involved in that. So we'll see. I have not sensed any sort of animosity toward this iteration of the Cavaliers. Obviously, going back with LeBron James, there was plenty, but this iteration of the Cavaliers, I haven't really sensed that. So I might be a little surprised if that happens. But when the playoffs come around, we've seen this in every single series almost around the NBA, at least the ones that have been competitive. At some point, you get that technicals are flying. So I can't say I'd be shocked if I saw it, but I don't think we're going to see it at quite the same level that we saw in Pacers Bucks.
Pat, I got to tell you, I was shocked that the team remove John Haliburton for the foreseeable future, I guess was the wording on that. Obviously, everyone's seen the incident by now. I said small market teams don't really want to disrupt their star players and tick them off. I thought maybe they would let the league handle any sort of discipline. Were you surprised that the team told him stay home for the foreseeable future? And was there other incidents that led up to that one that everyone knows about now, or was that really just the only one?
No real incidents. I can't say I was surprised, but at the same time, this is such a unique thing. There really isn't precedence with this. I thought both Tyrese and John handled it very well after the fact. Obviously, in John's case, he shouldn't have been out there, and he admitted to that. And it was a moment where I think he got caught up in everything. I've had the good fortune to get to know John a little bit, and I will echo what Rick said in that he's got a heart of gold, and sometimes he's a little too unrestrained with that heart of gold, but he really does mean well. He's a great guy, and I think Tyrese was the first to say it post game. He got on that podium and immediately started to say, in his words, "My pop shouldn't have been out there. That shouldn't be happening. We'll have a discussion." And so I think this is a position from a Pacers perspective of let's make sure this doesn't get out of hand. Let's stem this off right now. But I don't really anticipate that having any sort of play in the series. Unfortunately, it ended up being a lot of fodder for talk shows, and I thought that was unfortunate for Tyrese because he had this unbelievable moment. The Pacers are down by 7 points with 40 seconds left to go in Game 5 and had this miraculous comeback to stun the Bucks, and Haliburton had all these big moments on this big stage, and I wish the conversation were more about exactly what he did in that Game 5. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But I tend to think this is wipe the slate clean and move forward with it, and I don't really anticipate that being any sort of significant storyline here going forward into this series.
Pat, when we look at the upcoming series, Cavs and Pacers, Indy likes to play fast. Cleveland can play fast. Cleveland, I think, is a little better than Indiana when it comes to slowing things down if needed, and I think the winner of this series is going to be the team that dictates the pace better. From your perspective, what has made Indiana so effective at dictating their pace on opposing teams this season, and something Cleveland's going to have to keep an eye on and try to counteract once Game 1 tips off on Sunday?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to last year as well. The Pacers were playing at this breakneck speed, and other teams were struggling to adjust to it. And one thing that's really hard in the playoffs is playing at a really fast pace of play. The game slows down, it gets more physical. And for whatever reason, the Pacers, I feel like, have had more success than other teams that want to play at the speed that they do of keeping that up in the playoffs. That obviously starts with Haliburton. I mean, he's so good at those get-ahead passes and pushing things forward. And Rick Carlisle, if you watch him, he's going to look like a third base coach in baseball, waving the guy home on a single up the middle, because he's doing this constantly because he wants his team to go, and it's a constant reminder. And one of Rick Carlisle's biggest messages in that series against Milwaukee was Giannis is going to beat you a lot, and he's going to finish at the rim a lot. But when that happens, when Giannis beats you, that inbound pass off of the make has to be instantaneous because you want to make Giannis run the other direction immediately off a made basket. Now, the dynamics against Cleveland, to me, are extremely different. First of all, I think what the Cavs have done this year, adjusting and playing faster, has fit their personnel so well, and I think that's a huge reason why we've seen this massive jump forward in Cleveland. You got some great athletes on the Cavs, and maybe not always utilized as well as they should have been in previous years, and now they certainly are. So I don't think there's that big gap like there maybe was against Milwaukee in terms of wanting to play faster and the advantages of that. And then the other thing is, in that Bucks series, it was Giannis up here and everybody else down here. Cleveland very clearly has a level of depth from a star perspective, but just 1 through 8, 9, 10, however many they want to go, that Milwaukee just did not have. So it's an area the Pacers will look to take advantage of, but I can't say that I feel like it'll be quite as effective as it maybe has been in other series, just because the Cavs are a much, much more complete team. But one thing you'll watch is when Donovan Mitchell hits a shot like this, like Haliburton will be instantly inbounding the ball in. So their pace is not just off of misses and running. The Pacers will, when the other team puts the ball through the bucket, be running down on the other end of the floor too, and that will sometimes catch teams off guard. But you have to imagine that's a big part of Cleveland's game planning and scouting for this, so they won't catch them by surprise.
Pat, clearly the Cavs are favored to win this series. Not going to ask you to make a pick. Don't want to make news. Don't want to put you in that spot either. I'll ask it this way. The Pacers, to win this series, must do what?
Take care of home court. And I know that's not enough because Cleveland has home court advantage, but I would say the Pacers probably have to win all 3 games on their home court. I think the formula here for Indiana is very similar to what they did in this round against New York last year, which was they won their 3 home games and then they stole game 7. I don't know that it has to happen exactly like that, but look, it would be really, really hard to win 2 games in Cleveland. And so can the Pacers win 1? I absolutely think so. And if they can win 1, they're going to have to take care of their home court. If you look at the playoffs in the first round the last 2 years, the Pacers are 9-0 at home. They lost 2 against Boston, different, realm there. And to be fair, Cleveland is a different realm too in terms of caliber of opponent. But the Pacers have been so good on their home floor in the playoffs. That's absolutely a non-negotiable going to have to continue here in this series. An interesting nugget is the Pacers were 10-15 on December 8th. And from that day on, this has been a completely different version of this team. The Pacers, counting the playoffs, are 44-18 since that day. That's the 4th best record in the NBA. It's behind only Oklahoma City, Cleveland, and Boston is 1 game ahead. So I say that to say this. The Pacers are no question the underdogs. The Cavs are no question the favorites. But if you look at really the last 4.5 months, Indiana's been playing at a win percentage of a team that wins 57, 58, 59 games over the course of a season. So I would say the Pacers are playing better than their seeds would suggest. I would say they have the experience the last couple of years to potentially give the Cavs a really good run here, and if things go well, to steal the series. But Cleveland won 64 games. That's an absurd number. They had maybe the best first-round playoff series of all time in the past round. So, look, you have to give credit to what the Cavs have done this year. It's been absolutely spectacular. They deserve the 1 seed, and they deserve to be favorites in this series. But you never know. That's why they play the games.
Pat, who do you guys need to step up that may be on the fringes a little bit if you are going to get the upset in this series? Somebody who, maybe not be, one of the frontline names, but need a great series offensive, defensively to pull this thing out.
2 guys, they almost go hand in hand. You almost can't talk about one without the other. And look, we know the stars are going to be vital. Mitchell, Garland, Mobley, and then on the Pacers side, Haliburton and Siakam. How those 5 guys play, I think, will ultimately be the biggest determining factor in how the series goes. But for the Pacers, there's 2 guys that really lift their ceiling to another level, and that's Andrew Nembhard and Aaron Nesmith. And Nembhard was spectacular in the playoffs last year, a big reason why the Pacers got to the Eastern Conference Finals. Really good in series number 1. And then Aaron Nesmith was, I just thought, spectacular against Milwaukee and had 2 huge buckets down the stretch. He's been shooting over 40% from 3. And a big reason why you kind of tie these 2 together, and along with Miles Turner there on that graphic, he'd be included as well. The Pacers are not a lockdown defensive team, but they've gotten a lot better. And the biggest reason is because of those 2 guys, Nembhard and Nesmith. So when those 2 are adding offensive firepower to their defensive game, the Pacers are really good and really dangerous. But I would say at minimum, one of them has to be playing at a really high level, and perhaps both of them at a high level to pull off an upset in this series. But they're very capable, and both were great against Milwaukee in round number 1, and both have been showing the ability to step their game up when the stage gets bigger. So from a Pacers point of view, from a glass half full type of perspective, you'd say, well, if those 2 can replicate what they did in round 1, the Pacers are probably a better team than they were in the regular season. But it's a big if. I mean, it's asking a lot for those guys to average 15 to 20 points per game when Haliburton and Siakam are also going to be doing those things. So I'd look at those 2, and then Miles Turner probably a very close second. He was great in the Bucks series and is going to have to, I think, stretch the floor. Allen is a terrific center, but where Turner has an advantage there is his ability to stretch the floor out to the 3-point line. So I think he's going to have to play really well also. It's one of those series where to pull off the upset, you can't probably, from Indiana's perspective, have many, if any, guys that you wouldn't say at the end of the series had a really good series. It's going to have to be, an all-in type of deal for the Pacers to win this. But again, as we've been talking about, they're very capable. They had that type of series against the Knicks last year, and they've won 3 playoff series the last 2 years coming into this. So they have the experience of the big moment, but this is certainly a higher caliber of opponent than they faced, I would say, in either of those cases, either the Bucks series. And the Knicks series was probably their most impressive win. Winning Game 7 in the Garden is no joke. But 64 wins and the way the Cavs have played this year, I would say, is a step up from what the Knicks were at this time last season.
We've talked about it at length here in Cleveland, the evolution of Evan Mobley, especially his offensive game here, Pat. When you look at some of the cross matchups, at least on paper, it appears Siakam would get the first knock at trying to guard Evan Mobley. Mobley's got some size on Siakam, but Siakam's got a little more veteran wiliness to him. If that is the eventual matchup, if Indiana decides to guard Evan Mobley with Siakam, can Pascal withstand the physicality that Mobley will bring to the game and try to take him off the dribble and bring him in the block? Because I know he's not as big as Evan, but it's not like he's a newbie to the playoffs in that kind of atmosphere.
Yeah, the good news here for Siakam is he just spent a whole series guarding Giannis, so there's really no tougher assignment than that from a defensive perspective, from a power forward or whatever. But look, I mean, Mobley is an unbelievable young player, and I think the Pacers match up really well with Milwaukee. I think there are areas that they can exploit against Cleveland, but there aren't these gaping holes or massive warning lights where if the Pacers can do these things, the opponent's going to be in trouble just because of the depth that it seems that Cleveland has. And Mobley is a great example of that. And then having Allen in the front court. So Siakam is a terrific player. He's Mr. Consistency. He's probably Indiana's number 1 leader because he's been there. He's done that. He's won a championship. You cannot overstate the significance of that trade and bringing him in and what it's meant to the Pacers the last couple of years in this playoff run. It's a fascinating matchup if it happens because Mobley is bigger, probably a little bit stronger, probably a touch more athletic. But Siakam has that experience factor, and he's just got an ability on the other end of the floor. As good as Mobley is defensively, which is top couple player in the league and defensive player of the year, Siakam has just a knack of getting shots off in tight quarters and all of that. So I actually think the front court matchup is fascinating. Siakam and Mobley, and then Turner and Allen, and maybe how those matchups go a very long way into the series. I think the Pacers had a significant advantage in the Miles Turner versus whoever Milwaukee wanted to throw out in round 1. That's not the case here in round 2. Allen's a former All-Star. And a much sterner test, I think, in the front court than the Pacers just faced.
So where are those areas do you think that the Pacers can exploit the Cavs? And then also, I'm just wondering, the series last year against the Celtics, obviously Boston's bigger than Cleveland is, bigger on the wings and all that, but was there anything from that series that they can draw on or they learned from going against a behemoth like that when they're faced with another one now?
Yeah, I think so. And to answer your second question first, I think the biggest part of that is just executing down the stretch in these close games. If you go back to Boston Game 1, the Pacers kind of had Game 1 won and let it slip. And they were up by 3 with the ball with like 8 seconds left or something like that. The Pacers turn it over. Jaylen Brown hits a 3, and then the Celtics win in overtime. I'm not suggesting the Pacers win the series if they get Game 1, but it's a very different series if they do. And the other 3 games, especially Games 3 and 4 in Indiana, were extremely close, ones that Boston pulled out at the end. I know it was a sweep, and I'm not trying to suggest the Pacers were on the verge of winning that series. They weren't, but they were a lot more competitive than I think you might just look at that series on paper and expect. And so that's the caliber of opponent, in my opinion, that you're facing with Cleveland here. So I think just the experience of getting to play a team that deep. I mean, the Cavs 1 through 5 are tremendous, and Boston 1 through 5 is tremendous. And while Milwaukee has Giannis, top to bottom, they are not the same caliber of team. Frankly, I don't even think they're close. And so experiencing, the game plan is just so different because it's one massive player for Milwaukee and then a bunch of other guys who are capable, but you're not confusing them for all-stars, and certainly I'm talking with Lillard out. On the Cavs side, you got 4 guys who are all-stars. So it's very, very different in that regard. And, I think for the Pacers, we talked about the pace. I mean, this game is going to have to be played at a fast pace, although I do think Cleveland is capable of winning a series, even if it is played at Indiana's pace. But that's probably the first area of where the Pacers could really take advantage. And then, Indiana's offense was terrific, and for the most part against Milwaukee, they averaged over 30 assists per game. When that ball's moving, and as we talked about earlier, Nembhard and Nesmith are hitting their shots, then the Pacers really do have 5 great offensive weapons as well. So the formula for Indiana pulling off this upset is probably something along the lines of you win all your home games, Tyrese Haliburton is great, Pascal Siakam is great, and Miles Turner's probably knocking down threes and moving Allen out of the paint, which is allowing other players to get into the paint and scoring. Nembhard and Nesmith having good series. So it's going to take an all-in effort for Indiana to pull something like this off, but I think they're probably going to try to play at a breakneck pace as much as humanly possible and try to break Cleveland down that way, because when the Cavs get set in that half-court defense, they're just so tough. So how often are the Pacers in that half court? How often are they taking a shot with the shot clock under 8? If it's a lot, could be a long series for Indiana. If they're getting good looks up quickly, then I think they've got a chance to really extend this and make it an interesting series.
All right, Pat, excellent job. Enjoy the series. I know we will, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Appreciate y'all having me. Enjoyed it.